I'm afraid the Ardmore isn't quite the right fit for this evening, Loretta Foss said, her voice smooth and practiced, as she positioned herself between Trent Pallister and the entrance to the dining room. Trent stood with his 8-year-old daughter Calla pressed against his side, her small hand wrapped around two of his fingers the way she had held on since she was a toddler. He wore a flannel jacket that had seen too many winters and a pair of jeans he usually kept for weekends at the cottage. Rain had darkened the shoulders of the jacket and dampened the ends of Calla's hair. He had a confirmed reservation. He had already paid for a membership his daughter did not know existed. He had promised to bring Calla to see the painting of the river that her late mother had chosen for the east wall of the dining room. The one Diane used to say made the whole room feel like it was breathing. And Loretta was looking at his jacket the way a person looks at something left in the wrong place. What Loretta did not know, what nobody in the Ardmore that evening had any reason to suspect, was that the man she was turning away had founded the club, financed its construction, approved every design choice from the brass door handles to the layout of the kitchen, and had been receiving complaints about its management for the better part of 2 months. He had not come to reveal himself. He had come to understand exactly how deep the problem ran before anyone had the chance to hide it. For 6 weeks, Trent Pallister had been reading letters and online reviews that contradicted every report his general manager Bertrand Lacasse sent to head office. Guests described cold treatment, unexplained charges on their bills, and staff who seemed to assess the value of a person before deciding how much eye contact to offer. 3 long-term members had quietly let their memberships lapse without explanation. The reports from Bertrand, by contrast, were immaculate. Satisfaction scores near perfect, staff evaluations glowing, charts that climbed in precisely the direction a healthy club's charts were supposed to climb. The numbers were too tidy. Trent had spent enough time in this industry to know that a real place, one with real guests and real complexity, never produced numbers that clean. He could have announced a formal audit. Bertrand would have prepared for it. The floors would have been polished, the staff briefed, the difficult situations quietly managed to other evenings. Trent would have seen a performance rather than the truth. So he dressed like a man who owned nothing remarkable, packed Calla into a cab on a wet Thursday in October, and told her only that they were going somewhere her mother had loved. Calla had been quiet during the ride across the city. She was 8 years old and carried herself with a stillness that sometimes made Trent's chest ache. She had her mother's gray eyes and a habit of watching adults carefully before she spoke. Diane had been gone 2 years, and Calla had handled it with a composure that no child should have to develop so early. When the cab pulled to the curb on King Street West, Calla leaned toward the window and looked up at the building. "Is that where Mum's painting is?" she asked. "It's inside," Trent said, "in the dining room." She nodded once and reached for his hand. The doorman under the awning glanced at them, then looked past them toward a black SUV pulling up 50 meters back. He kept his eyes on it until its occupants, 2 men in overcoats who walked with the easy confidence of people accustomed to being greeted first, reached the entrance. He held the door open for them. Trent pulled it open himself and brought Calla inside. The lobby of the Ardmore was everything Diane had designed it to be. Warm walnut paneling, a low ceiling that made the room feel intimate rather than grand, and soft amber lighting that Diane had spent 3 weeks getting exactly right, because she believed a room should welcome you before anyone inside it did. A framed photograph hung near the coat check, the opening night nearly 5 years earlier. Trent and Diane stood together beneath the chandelier, both laughing at something just off camera. Calla had not noticed it yet. The front desk clerk glanced up when they approached, then returned to whatever was on his screen. Trent gave his name. The clerk typed for a moment, paused, and said he was having trouble locating the reservation. Trent showed him the confirmation on his phone. The clerk looked at it, typed again, and said the member dining room was currently at capacity. "You might want to try the bar lounge," he added, already shifting his attention toward a couple who had come in behind them. Trent and Calla were left standing at the desk while the couple received a warm welcome, a mention of their usual table, and an escort toward the dining room within 90 seconds of walking in. They found 2 seats near the entrance, not far from a draft where cold air slipped in each time the door opened. No one brought menus. No one offered to take their coats. Across the lobby, Trent watched things he had not been able to see from the reports. An older man questioned a membership charge that had appeared without explanation. The clerk told him the fee was standard and non-negotiable, though Trent knew no such fee existed in the membership structure he had approved. A young family, a mother, her husband, their 2 teenage daughters, stood at the dining room entrance. They were members, Their reservation was in the system, but the hostess told them the dining room was experiencing a delay and suggested they wait at the bar. Trent watched them wait for nearly 20 minutes before giving up and leaving. No one apologized. No one followed them to the door. A junior server named Kira Lafleur caught his eye from across the room. She had noticed Trent and Calla sitting in the cold corner, and after a moment's hesitation, she crossed the lobby with 2 glasses of water and a small plate of warm bread rolls she had taken from the service station without being asked. She crouched slightly to set the plate where Calla could reach it. "It's not much," she said, "but they just came out of the oven." Calla's face changed immediately. She reached for one and looked up at Kira with the particular gratitude of a child who has been hungry and ignored for long enough to know the difference. Before Trent could speak, a sharp voice came from the direction of the member services desk. Loretta Foss had returned from the dining room and was already moving toward them with the expression of someone who had noticed an irregularity. "Kira." Her voice was low but precise. "Why are you away from your station?" "The little girl has been sitting here a while, I thought." "Service in the member dining room is by seating only. You are not authorized to extend hospitality to unconfirmed guests." "They have a reservation, I checked." Loretta's expression did not shift. "Return to your station, we'll discuss this later." Kira glanced at Calla, then at Trent. She apologized quietly and walked away. Trent watched her go and kept her name in his mind. Calla ate the roll slowly, then she looked up at him. "Dad, are we still going to see Mum's painting?" He looked toward the dining room entrance. "That's why we're here." "Is it the one with the credit river? The big one she liked?" Trent looked at her. "You remember that?" She used to describe it. She said it felt like looking out a window that didn't exist. He was quiet for a moment. Diane had spent a week finding that painting. She had driven out to a studio in Elora because the artist didn't ship, and she had carried it back to Toronto wrapped in moving blankets in the back of their Subaru. She had hung it herself on a Tuesday morning before the club opened, and she had stood back and said that now the room was finished. "Yes," he told Calla, "we're going to see it." By the time they reached the entrance to the dining room, Loretta was already at the host stand. Her expression shifted the moment she looked at Trent's jacket, and then, briefly, at Calla's wet hair and rain-spotted boots. "I'm sorry," she said, with the careful intonation of someone who was not sorry at all. "The dining room is fully reserved this evening." Trent looked past her. At least 4 tables were empty, including the one near the east wall, the one beneath Diane's painting. "I have a reservation," he said. "Pallister, 2 guests." Loretta consulted her tablet. "I don't see anything available under that name." Trent showed her the confirmation. It included the date, the time, the table number, and the notation he had added himself, "East wall near painting." Her expression tightened for just a moment, then, "There appears to have been a system error. I'm afraid we can't honor that booking tonight." "The confirmation is valid. There are open tables." "Those are being held." "For guests with higher spending averages?" he asked. Loretta's chin lifted. "For guests with standing arrangements." Calla was looking between them. "Dad, why won't she let us in?" Loretta did not answer her. At that moment, a group of 4 arrived at the host stand without a reservation. They were loud and well-dressed, and one of them knew Loretta by her first name. Loretta's entire posture changed. She smiled, a real smile this time, and said she would find something for them immediately. She turned to the hostess beside her, spoke quietly, and within 2 minutes the group was being led through the dining room toward the table beside the east wall. The table directly beneath Diane's painting. Calla watched them walk to it. She was quiet for a long moment. "Is that Mum's painting?" she asked, pointing. Trent looked at the river scene glowing softly under the amber light. Diane had been right. It did look like a window. "Yes," he said. "Did they give away our table so they could sit near it?" Trent kept his voice steady. "Yes." She looked up at him. "Is it because of your jacket?" The question hit him harder than anything Loretta had said. He crouched down so they were eye to eye. "There is nothing wrong with my jacket," he said, "and there is nothing wrong with us." "Then why?" "Because some people make decisions about who belongs somewhere before they've asked a single question." She thought about that, then quietly, "Would they have let us in if they knew you owned it?" Trent looked toward Loretta. "That," he said, "is exactly what I came to find out." They stayed near the entrance. Loretta managed the flow of guests around them as though they were furniture placed inconveniently. Calla's stomach made a small sound that Trent heard clearly. He was about to take her to the Tim Hortons 2 blocks over when he saw Kira slipping out from a service corridor with a small basket of rolls and 2 cups of hot chocolate. The kind the club made with real milk and dark Belgian chocolate, the recipe Diane had given the kitchen manager on their very first meeting. Kira held the basket out to Calla with both hands. Loretta appeared from nowhere. She took the basket directly from Kira's grip. Several nearby guests turned to look. Calla's hand had already been reaching forward. "You were told to return to your station," Loretta said. "She's hungry." Kira's voice shook slightly, but she held Loretta's eye. "They've been waiting over an hour. You are not authorized to extend club hospitality to walk-in visitors." "They're not walk-ins, he has it confirmed. Our dining room serves members whose relationship with this club reflects the standard we maintain." Loretta held the basket away and turned back toward the host's stand. "We cannot provide complimentary service to every person who arrives at the door." Trent rose from his chair. His voice was quiet and very clear. "Say that again." Loretta paused. "I beg your pardon." "The part about who deserves service." She turned back to face him. "The Ardmore is a private members club. We maintain a certain environment. Our guests pay for a consistent experience. They are not expecting to share an evening with." Her gaze moved quickly and deliberately from his boots to his face. "People who are not part of that world." Kira stared at her. Trent looked around the room. Several members of the floor staff had heard the exchange. Some looked away. Others watched with the particular stillness of people who have heard similar things before and have learned not to object. An older man appeared at the host stand then, moving carefully, holding his overcoat over one arm and a small velvet box in his other hand. His name was Ernest Dubois. He was 72 years old, a retired secondary school teacher from Longueuil who had moved to Toronto after his wife Marie passed. He and Marie had come to the Ardmore every year on the anniversary of their first date, which had happened by accident at a gallery opening near where the club now stood. After Diane designed the room, Marie had told Ernest it was the most beautiful place she had ever eaten. She had made him promise to keep coming even after she was gone. Ernest gave his name to the hostess with the careful pronunciation of someone who knows his accent sometimes requires patience. She found his reservation, then looked nervously toward Loretta. Loretta scanned the room and said his reserved table was no longer available. "We had to accommodate a private event. I can offer you a table near the service station." Ernest looked at her gently. "My Marie and I always sat at the corner table by the window. I confirmed it yesterday." "I understand that's your preference. Tonight we don't have the flexibility." "Tonight is the specific evening that matters to me," he said. Loretta's expression did not change. "I'm sorry, we can't rearrange the room for sentimental reasons." Ernest stepped to one side. No one offered him a seat. No one suggested a genuine alternative. He stood there with the quiet dignity of a man who has learned that the world sometimes simply refuses to accommodate grief, and who has made peace with that without entirely accepting it. Trent walked over and introduced himself. Ernest shook his hand and explained about Marie, about the anniversary, about the corner table and the window, and the way the city lights looked from that particular chair in October when the rain was on the glass. He said Marie used to believe that a beautiful restaurant should make anyone feel like tonight was the most important night of their life, regardless of the number on their credit card. "How many times has this happened to you?" Trent asked. Ernest considered. "To me? Twice before. I've seen it happen to others as well. You notice after a while which kind of place this has become." He paused. "It wasn't always like this." Trent felt something settle into certainty inside him. The complaints were not exaggerations. They were not isolated failures of individual employees having difficult evenings. This was a culture, built carefully over time by people who had decided that the club's original values were inconvenient, and that no one was watching closely enough to notice. He turned toward the host stand. "I'd like to speak with Bertrand Lacasse." Loretta did not look surprised. "Mr. Lacasse is occupied with a private event. Tell him a member is being denied a confirmed table, and that a long-standing guest has just lost his anniversary reservation to make room for a party that called in this afternoon." Several minutes passed. Then Bertrand Lacasse emerged from the private event room adjusting his jacket. He was the kind of man who moved through rooms as though he expected them to part for him. Loretta intercepted him and spoke quietly. Trent watched Bertrand listen without looking in his direction. When Bertrand finally approached, he did not ask for Trent's account of what had happened. He looked at Trent's jacket, glanced at Calla, and arrived at a conclusion that had nothing to do with the facts. "Mr. Pallister," he said, "I understand there's been some confusion about seating." "There's been no confusion," Trent said. "My reservation was valid. Your director gave our table to an unreserved party. The same thing has happened to this gentleman." He indicated Ernest. Bertrand offered a small, practiced smile. The Ardmore reserves the right to manage the dining experience according to the needs of our membership as a whole. Does the membership as a whole determine who deserves to be treated with basic respect? The smile remained. This is a premium environment. We have an obligation to protect the experience of guests who represent the club's identity. Calla was watching Bertrand. He did not look at her once. He reached into his jacket and withdrew 2 complimentary dining vouchers. Please accept these with our apologies. There's an excellent brasserie on Wellington that I think you'd find very comfortable. He held them out. I can have someone arrange a car. Trent did not take them. You'd like us to leave, Trent said. I'm offering a solution. Because our presence damages the room. Bertrand leaned forward slightly and lowered his voice. Our members expect consistency. The experience they pay for depends on the environment feeling curated. When that environment is disrupted, even unintentionally, it reflects on the club's reputation. Trent looked at him steadily. The person who founded this club believed something different. Bertrand exhaled quietly. With respect, the founding philosophy was written for a brochure. Businesses survive by being honest about what their market actually wants. Not every establishment is for every person. The founder promised that no one would need to demonstrate their net worth to be treated with dignity. Then perhaps, Bertrand said, the founder was idealistic. Trent held his gaze. I'm standing right in front of you. A murmur crossed through the room. Bertrand frowned, confused but not yet alarmed. And then from the dining room a sound cut through everything. A chair scraping hard against the floor, a clatter, a woman's voice rising toward something close to a scream. She can't breathe. Someone please help her. A teenage girl had slumped against her mother at a table near the center of the room. Her face was flushed and beginning to swell. Her breathing had narrowed to a thin, strained thread of sound. The mother was shaking. She has a nut allergy. I told them when I booked. I told the server when we sat down. I asked them to check the sauce. Staff froze. A hostess covered her mouth. Loretta moved forward and incredibly looked first at the guests raising phones at nearby tables. Please put those away, she said. This is a private medical situation. Trent crossed the room before anyone else reacted. Call 911, he said, and his voice carried the flat authority of someone who does not ask twice. Kira reached for the phone at the service station immediately. Trent knelt beside the girl. She was 16, maybe 17. Her airway was narrowing. Does she carry an EpiPen? The mother's hands were shaking as she dug through her bag. I can't find it. I thought I had it. The emergency medical cabinet, Trent said, rising and turning to the nearest server. East Service Corridor. 3rd panel from the left, behind the fire extinguisher bracket. There's a gray kit inside. Go now. The server stared at him. There's no cabinet there. Yes, there is. I built it. He said it without emphasis, without drama. Move. Kira, who had already called 911, ran for the corridor. Trent heard the panel open. 30 seconds later, she was back with the kit. Trent checked the expiry on the injector, administered it, and knelt beside the girl, monitoring her breathing and speaking quietly to her mother about keeping her calm and upright until the paramedics arrived. The ambulance will come to the King Street entrance, Loretta said. I'll have them escorted through the main. The main elevator stops at the mezzanine during evening service, Trent said without looking at her. Unlock the freight lift at the north end of the building. Clear the service hallway from the loading dock. It's the fastest route. Guests are not permitted in the freight. Trent looked up at her then, just looked at her. Something in his expression ended the sentence entirely. Kira was already moving staff out of the service corridor. The girl's breathing began to ease. By the time paramedics arrived through the freight lift, arriving faster than they would have through the main entrance, the worst had passed. The mother gripped Trent's arm as they prepared to leave. He shook his head and told her to go with her daughter. The dining room was silent. Loretta moved to address the guests. The situation is fully under control. We'll be reviewing our procedures. The allergy was on the reservation. Kira's voice came from beside the service station. Her hands were still unsteady, but her voice was not. I saw it this afternoon. It was flagged in the system. Loretta turned toward her very slowly. Kira, this is not the moment. The kitchen never received it. Kira's voice gained steadiness as she continued. Because you told the hostess not to print dietary flags at seating. You said it slowed down the flow during busy service. You said the kitchen could ask guests themselves if it came up. A sound moved through the room. That is not an accurate characterization of what I said, Loretta replied. It is exactly what you said. I heard it. So did 2 other servers. Kira looked around at her colleagues. Several of them met her eyes. Some nodded, barely perceptibly. This isn't the first time a dietary note didn't reach the kitchen. It's the first time someone ended up in an ambulance. Bertrand stepped toward her. You are distressed after a frightening incident. I'd encourage you to take the rest of the evening. The complaint records have been altered, Kira said. The original guest feedback isn't what gets sent to head office. I've seen the reports before they're rewritten. I've seen the difference. Bertrand's voice dropped to something careful and dangerous. You are making an extremely serious accusation. I know, she looked directly at him. I'm making it anyway. Loretta pointed toward the service corridor. You are dismissed. Collect your things and... No, Trent said. Loretta turned. He was standing in the middle of the dining room in his flannel jacket, his daughter's hand in his, rain-damp and entirely unhurried. She will not lose her job for telling the truth, he said. You have absolutely no authority in this establishment, Loretta said. Trent looked toward the north corridor, where a door had opened. A woman in a charcoal blazer entered carrying a leather folio. 2 members of a corporate review team followed her. Several staff members recognized her immediately from the company's annual meetings. Her name was Sylvain Tremblay. She was the chief operations officer of Pallister Hospitality Group, and she had been waiting for Trent's call. Sylvain walked past Bertrand without acknowledging him and stopped in front of Trent. Mr. Pallister, she said, the data team has secured the reservation records, the complaint archive, the altered satisfaction reports, and the kitchen communication logs for the past 14 months. The backup is complete. The room went quiet in a way it had not been quiet before. Bertrand looked from Sylvain to Trent. His face had changed color entirely. I don't, he started. Who are you? Calla tugged on Trent's hand and pointed toward the coat check near the entrance. Specifically, she pointed at the framed photograph from opening night. Dad, she said, that's your picture. She walked toward it and stood on her toes to look. Trent and Diane, 5 years younger, laughing under the amber chandelier, the same chandelier that hung above them now. Then Calla pointed to Diane. Her voice was very clear and very small, and it carried across every corner of the room. That's my mum, she said. She picked out the painting. Loretta's tablet slipped from her hand. Bertrand straightened his jacket as though the gesture might restore something already gone. Mr. Pallister, I had no idea. This has been a terrible... You are not sorry because you turned away a child who wanted to see her mother's painting, Trent said. You are not sorry because you took an old man's anniversary table. You are not sorry because a teenager nearly stopped breathing because your team couldn't be bothered to pass an allergy note to the kitchens. He paused. You are sorry because the person who signs your employment contract is standing in front of you. Sylvain opened the folio and read from the preliminary findings. Member complaints hidden or deleted before being forwarded to head office. Guest satisfaction scores adjusted before submission to corporate. Dietary and allergy protocols shortened to improve seating turnover. An informal system in place that ranked guests by appearance and estimated spending applied consistently across both the floor team and management. Staff who had raised concerns lost shifts or were placed on performance review. 3 members had ended their memberships without explanation, after incidents that had never been recorded in any file. As each item was named, Bertrand's excuses ran out one by one. Loretta stopped trying. Ernest Dubois had drifted back toward the entrance during all of this, and now he stood with his velvet box held against his chest, watching. The staff around him, the ones who had stayed quiet for months, were no longer looking away. Trent did not raise his voice when he spoke to Bertrand and Loretta. He told them their employment with Pallister Hospitality Group ended that evening. He told the supervisors connected to the altered records and the ignored allergy procedures that they were suspended pending investigation. He told the staff members who had watched and said nothing that he understood fear and that accountability was not the same as punishment for everyone in the room. He turned to Kira Lafleur and told her that her position was secure, that the shifts removed from her schedule over the past months would be restored, that her lost income would be reimbursed, and that she would be placed in the company's management development program immediately. Kira pressed her lips together and looked at the floor for a moment. When she looked up, she thanked him very quietly. He told her that courage was not always loud. Sometimes it was simply crossing a room with a basket of bread rolls when everyone around you had decided not to care. He found Ernest near the entrance and apologized, not as a distant owner, but as the man responsible for the building that had let him down. He invited him to the corner table by the window. Ernest hesitated, then accepted with a small, careful nod. They sat together, Trent, Calla, and Ernest. At the table where the rain was still sliding down the glass, and the city lights below scattered across it in the way Diane would have described without ever needing a painting to explain it. Ernest set his velvet box on the table. Inside was a small photograph of Marie, taken the last time they had come here together. Trent took his wallet from his jacket pocket and removed a photograph he always carried there. Diane at the opening night, standing in front of the Credit River painting with her arms folded and her head tilted back, the expression she wore when she had finished something she was proud of. He set it beside Marie's photograph, and for a while neither man said anything, and Calla sat between them and understood, the way children often understand more than adults expect, that this was a moment that required no words at all. Dinner was served, the room settled into something quieter and more honest than it had been in a long time. Calla looked at the painting on the east wall, and then at her father. She was right, she said. It does look like a window that doesn't exist. Trent looked at the painting for a long moment. She was right about most things. In the weeks that followed, Trent led a full reform of the Ardmore. Guest complaints were redirected to an independent system that floor management could not access or modify. Staff were given a protected channel to report concerns without fear of retaliation. Membership standards were published clearly and applied without exception to every person who walked in. Dietary and allergy protocols were restored to their original requirements, with mandatory kitchen confirmation before any dish reached a table. Management performance reviews were tied to verified guest feedback and staff satisfaction, not to the numbers any single manager had the power to shape before sending them upward. The private dining room at the back of the club, the one with the best view of the city, was renamed the Diane Room. Trent had it engraved on a small brass plate beside the door, and below her name he placed the words she had written into the original staff handbook. A beautiful place becomes beautiful only when it belongs to everyone who enters it. Kira Lafleur became the floor manager. She was known among the staff as someone who listened before she decided, who remembered the names of the regulars and the reasons behind their visits, and who had a way of noticing when a guest had been waiting too long before anyone else thought to look. Ernest came back every October, always to the corner table by the window, always with the small photograph of Marie set beside the candle. Some evenings Trent joined him for a glass of wine, and they talked about their wives the way men talk about people they can no longer reach but have never stopped carrying. One evening the following autumn, Trent and Calla were standing near the entrance when a man came through the door with his teenage son. The father wore a work jacket with a company logo across the chest, and he paused just inside the entrance with the uncertain look of someone who is not sure whether he has walked into the right place, or whether a place like this was ever meant for someone like him. Kira was across the room in an instant. "Welcome to the Ardmore," she said, and the warmth in her voice was not a performance. "Your table is ready." The father's shoulders came down. His son looked up at the chandelier the way Calla had looked at the painting on the first night she'd seen it. They followed Kira toward the east wall, toward the table beneath Diane's river painting, and Trent watched them go. Calla slipped her hand into his. He stood there for a while, in his regular jacket, in the room his wife had made beautiful, and understood that what Diane had believed about hospitality had not disappeared. It had only needed someone to come back and protect it.